America or Burst? We're talking Perfect Strangers. Hit it. It was 1986. Tapestry handbags were in. Argentina won the World Cup. Madonna told Papa not to preach. And Larry and Balki had some Christmas hijinks. I'm your host, Jerry D, with another episode of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, and fads. If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. Now, joining me is a very special guest. You'll know him as the host of the bodacious TGI Podcast, Matt Eurich. Matt, how's it going?
Jerry, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. Anytime I can talk about TGIF and all those crazy awesome shows that were on it, I'll take it.
Amen to that. I mean, it gnawed on me for a while that there wasn't a market for this podcast. So I was like, you know what? If I can't find it to listen to, I'm just going to do it myself. And I'm going to talk about all these shows I love and talk about all these awesome episodes and have some fun with it.
Oh, I completely agree. There's so many good ones. I mean, I remember it was like a big thing Friday night, and we'd make popcorn and, we'd have pizza or burgers or something fun. And we'd just sit around watching TGIF, Perfect Strangers and Family Matters and Step by Step and Full House and all those. I mean, they're great,
Yeah, it hits me. And like, it's so similar to me. I have these memories of just throwing down like a blanket in the living room and my parents ordering pizza and my sister and I sitting on the floor in the living room, just watching all these shows. Like, it's pure nostalgia for me. That's what I love about, like, I watch these shows and it just makes me feel good.
Yeah, same here. Well, and the show we're talking about tonight as well, just happened to be part of TGIF.
Mm-hmm.
So what's you kind of already said a little bit, but like, what's your general thoughts on Perfect Strangers?
The funniest thing about Perfect Strangers ran from, I believe, like 86 to 93, 94, somewhere around there. So I was born in 86. So I don't obviously remember these episodes when they came out. I think at the back end, I remember them a little bit, and that they didn't go on TGIF, I think, until later in their run. Yeah. But I always, for whatever reason, I remembered this show and I remembered Balki, but I could never remember the name of it. My sister and I would rack our brains over it and we'd be like, remember that show with Balki? Remember? And we were probably 11, 12, 13. And like, the internet wasn't what it is now. It wasn't like, oh, just search Balki and then you'll find your answer. Like, we had no idea. And then suddenly one year I found the DVD for like the first season and I was like, oh my God, that's the show. That's it. And I bought it for my sister for Christmas, and we were both like, oh my God, we have to watch this. This is awesome. And so like, that's my like connection with this show. Was it eluded me for a weird long period of time, but it's been so fun rewatching these. And I did one on my podcast for Thanksgiving and it was a blast. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about this show that's super wholesome to me, like more so than some of the others. And I don't know if it's because there's not the kids in it. Like, it's just two adults and like going through those storylines, but it's fun. It's a fun show. It's so innocent and silly, and it's just perfectly 80s, perfectly 90s. It just fits that perfectly.
It really does. My wife had never seen it. And so I showed her the pilot. I knew it was on Hulu, so I was like, hey, let's watch this just the other day. And she saw it and she was like, this show is weird. And I think it's one of those you have to grow up with it, because a lot of it is definitely very of its time. I mean, it's very much of its time. And some of the jokes don't quite land. I mean, I don't know if you could get away with some of the things, nowadays that they got away with. I mean, even Balki himself might be considered problematic by today's standards. But back then, I mean, it was funny, and especially you think about Bronson Pinchot, who got the gig basically off of Serge, his character from Beverly Hills Cop. And so you like take all this into account, and it's just, for me, it really brings back, the memories that we were talking about, but also I have to agree with your sentiment about the innocence. And I think it's because Balki is so wholesome and innocent. He has that naivete that that you can kind of see people take advantage of, but at the same time, he has like good, strong morals as well. And so, yeah, it's definitely much more wholesome. You're right, than some of those other ones, especially like you think about Step by Step, where the kids try to like pull one over on the adults sometimes and stuff like that,
Yeah. Like, to your point, there is this sort of like pureness with Balki as a character that he's just an easy guy to root for, and it comes up in these in the 2 episodes we're doing that Balki is just like the heart of this, because he is almost the child figure in the show, but it works and it's easier to connect to because he is an adult.
He's an adult, yeah.
So it makes it a little bit easier than watching, like you said, like in a reference to like Step by Step, all these kids pulling these schemes and stuff. It's harder to connect with it when you're older, but now like rewatching Perfect Strangers, for me, it's been like, wow, I really like this character. Like, he's kind of relatable in the sense that his sweetness and purity is like what you should strive for as a person. It's kind of cool.
I remember the thing I always waited for every episode was the dance of joy.
Yes.
You need to have the dance of joy. And so whenever they did it in one of those episodes, it was like the best. And so my brothers and I would get up and pretend to do it and, try our best to imitate it. And so I showed my daughter the dance of joy on YouTube. And so now she loves it. And so every once in a while, she'll just be like, "No, we're so happy we do the dance of joy."
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And I got to admit, these 2 Christmas episodes got me. They really did, especially the second one. The second one was right in the feels, as they say. It's so packed full of heart that I mean, how can you not be affected by it? I think a lot of it has to do, like you said, with that sweetness and that purity of Balki. And I don't know, I don't think it would have worked without him, honestly.
Yeah, if he was just sort of a straight-laced, blue-collar guy, I don't think it connects with you the way that he does. And I think that was what was so interesting about that character. I don't think this show ever got any sort of critical acclaim, and honestly, it really shouldn't have. I mean, it's not anything groundbreaking, but it's just a good, wholesome. It reminds me a lot of like your wholesome shows of maybe the 50s and 60s before, like the 80s and the 90s were a lot more experimental and doing things a little bit differently and outside of the box. And in a sense, it kind of does, because Balki's such an interesting outside of the box ish character, but he's so similar to many others. And it's just, I don't know. It's just, it's fun. It's just a fun, easygoing type of show. Like, nothing's going to really hit you that hard one way or the other. And that's why it works.
Yeah. Well, the series was created essentially by Dale McRaven, Tom Miller, and Robert Boyette. And they kind of thought about this idea of an immigrant coming to America. And this was right around the 84 Olympics, when really there was like just a whole surge of like, pride in the country and things like that. And so he pitched the idea and no one bought it. They, like I said, they saw Bronson Pinchot in Beverly Hills Cop, and they thought, what about this guy? He's really funny. I bet he could pull it off. And with him attached, someone ended up actually buying the series. It was ABC, of course. But for his cousin, they actually, and I thought this was interesting because I had no idea about this, they actually cast Louis Anderson. And
oh, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that either.
They even filmed a pilot, which is strange. But they just, I guess there was no real chemistry there. It just didn't quite work. And so it wasn't until an episode of Moonlighting when, what's his name? Mark Lynn Baker was a guest, and they saw him and they thought, what about that guy? He's kind of got that quality. And so they screen tested him and yeah, they had the chemistry. And so immediately they rushed it in production. And so 86 was when we got it. Originally, they decided to put it in between Who's the Boss and Moonlighting. So it was like a crazy huge primetime spot, it's like right in between these 2 big heavy hitters. And it did so well that then they they moved it to Wednesday in order to boost like some other shows. And then from there, of course, mid third season is when they put it back on TGIF, and it stayed there until about fifth or sixth season when they moved it to Saturday night to try to boost Empty Nest and the Golden Girls and like that whole Saturday night stay in or whatever it was called. And it didn't quite work. Like the ratings really started to drop, and it wasn't until like during the off season they moved it back in the reruns to Friday, and all of a sudden it started picking up. It was winning the time slot again. So then they put it back on Friday. So it's like a one of those whole crazy things where it's like, let's try here, then here, then here, and it just, so that's probably why you don't really remember it very much in TGIF, because it was probably moved to that Saturday spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, knowing that it jumped around that much. And it's hard for, I could understand why it's hard for a show like that where they find the success with it. So then they want to use it to boost other things.
Right.
And then you're jumping around, but in the end, all you're doing is sort of putting a negative mark on the show. Cause I'm sure it was hard for people to find, especially then, as I mentioned before, it's so easy now to, what's on TV. It's going to tell you on your TV what's on.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And back then you were only getting, for some people still didn't have cable. It was still just your basic antenna or, a very limited sort of cable. So you're only getting X amount of channels. So back then it was harder to figure out when it was on. Maybe you had your TV guide or whatever, but or jumping it around that. Yeah. And that's what makes sense now that you brought that up, why I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Like I knew enough of it, but I couldn't remember fully what it was until I got older. And I'm sure it had to do with the jumping around so much.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because it's another one of those where they kind of change a few things from seasons to season and don't really explain it. It's just, that's how it was. And one of those is, so in the first two seasons, he's working with Mr. Twinkassetti, who we'll get into in a little bit when we get into the episodes. And so they're working at his kind of shop. But basically, Larry wants to be like a photojournalist. That's like his whole thing. And so he's working at the shop just to kind of pay the bills until he can get a spot. And then beginning of season 3, all of a sudden now he is a journalist. And, they don't really explain any of that. His apartment is much bigger. And I mean, it is a completely different apartment building, even on the exteriors. But it's one of those where they just don't really mention it at all. And his platonic female friend in season 1 just kind of disappears. And then they introduce Jennifer and Marianne. It's one of those things where you're just like, okay, so wait, what's going on now? And he had a boss there and then he was gone.
Yeah,
and
they just trusted that the fans would be like, okay, like, I guess.
That's exactly right.
Let's
yeah.
just keep moving on.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. Like, sure. Why not?
We trust.
And what a lot of us did back in the day.
Yeah, and that's true too. Like I mean, for the most part, sitcoms didn't really have to follow any sort of storyline. I mean, there's not a ton of sitcoms nowadays that don't have some sort of formula, that aren't going to, or really any sitcoms in general anymore. There's not as many, but timelines matter more now than they did back then. Back then it was just like, we don't have to tell you why what happened, and we're not going to explain why all of a sudden Larry has a new job and a new apartment and all of this. Like, it is what it is. You're going to watch it anyway. So we're not going to waste time telling you why.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So there were 2 Christmas episodes that I remember. One of them was A Christmas Story in season 2. And the other one was The Gift of the Meepiat in season 4. Both very good. I mean, I really enjoyed both of these. They, as I mentioned earlier, they really hit me in the Christmas feels. Just everything about it felt Christmassy. It's like compared to, I mean, when I did the Knight Rider episode, it's like barely any Christmas at all. And the only real Christmas is them saying that it's like Christmas. But these ones really like capitalized on that Christmas feel, and I feel like, I think this was the perfect vehicle for that. If and I don't recall the step by step or of course the Full House one is a classic, but some of the Family Matters ones I don't remember off the top of my head either. And it's some of those that I think this is perfect just because of that Balki Larry relationship. because the whole point is that Larry, who just moved out of Madison, into the city of Chicago, so he could like make it big on his own. It's like his first time living on his own. He wants to go back, and that's where we start with this season 2 episode. It's one of those things that everyone can relate about wanting to go back home, and everyone, most people can relate about being out on your own for the first time. And, it's kind of scary, but you make it work. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think.
And I think one of the reasons why this first episode works, and obviously we'll get into that a little more, is I think it's easy to look at it, especially in the light of what 2020 was, and with COVID and everything, and not being able to see, a lot of people not being able to see family, or not being able to see the same amount of family as they had before. And Larry kind of shares that frustration of, you build up in your mind everything that's going to happen, and then when it doesn't happen, it's super disappointing. So I think that that even made this more relatable, because it was like, I can feel what Larry's feeling. Like, I get it to a certain extent, because it just, for a lot of people, it just wasn't the same as it's always been, but you make the best of it.
Yeah. Looking at you, WandaVision.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I really enjoyed it. But I had hoped some of those rumors were true. So
I think we all did.
Yeah, I think we. Let's talk about A Christmas Story. This is Balki's, I guess it's his first Christmas in America, and so Larry has been talking about Christmas back home in Madison with all his 9 brothers and sisters and all that, and going back home, and he just can't stop talking about it. And so he's so excited to take Balki there. And it kind of starts off there at his job, where there's a little Christmas party. And of course, his boss, who's kind of a grumpy Gus or Scrooge-ish kind of guy, he's kind of upset that they're both there, but they get their Christmas bonuses, and we get like one of our first jokes where Balki is so excited to be getting an envelope for Christmas. And so from there they kind of go on about, I can't wait till you get to Madison. And so we cut to them packing. And I know I'm kind of going a little fast here, but I really want to get into both episodes, and I really want to get into the feels of it, because, this is just the setup, and they do a good job with Larry really building it up. Apparently he's been talking about it since July, or since June, and Balki's able to finish his sentences about everything. I love that so much when he's reading them off, and then Balki's finishing, and he's like, "Yeah, you've only been talking about it since June," and I was like, "I feel that. I am Larry. Like, I'll start building it up around June. That I know what I'm looking forward to." Yeah. So I definitely felt that one. Yeah, you're like, I'm personally insulted by this.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It definitely has that feel, especially for us, Christmas holiday, podcasters. I mean, that's like our big thing. So we get excited for it all year long, but really when we get close to that July mark is when we really start to push for it, with the whole Christmas in July thing. He's finishing his sentences. We cut to them packing, and Balki gets super excited about the snow. It's snowing outside. And of course, that's our first big hint that something's coming up. The classic blizzard is happening. Let's, are we going to be able to make it or not? I mean, Full House did it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I love this part, because Marianne and Jennifer come in, and they're talking about they're going on a ski trip, and they're so excited. And of course, we get another joke about, I hear it's better with snow. Yeah. I hear skiing is better with snow. But
Marianne playing that ditzy role,
she
has to, just perfect.
Yeah. And I always liked Marianne, and I liked her with Balki, because they just really complimented each other.
Oh, they were perfect.
I had forgotten that they end up getting married later on as well. I mean, I remembered Jennifer and Larry, but I'd forgotten that Balki and Marianne got married as well. So it's one of those, like, now that I've seen these two, I want to go back and just binge the whole thing, but I'm going to have to do it when my wife's asleep, probably. She hasn't quite grown on it yet. But so they're talking to Jennifer, and we get another funny bit that I just love this bit where, their girls are about to leave, and Larry's like, there's mistletoe there. And so they kind of stop. And so he, gives a nice little peck to Marianne on the cheek and then passionately kisses Jennifer, and they're both like shaken as he's walking away.
The look on both of their faces when they like come up for air is just so funny. Like just shocked but excited, and it's so funny. It is so funny.
But then he does this funny bit where he like just kind of cocks his head, to the side to tell Balki to go in, and he throws his thumb back, and so Balki does the same thing. He goes to give Jennifer a little peck, and then instead of dipping Marianne dips him in a passionate kiss.
Oh, so good. Good.
It is. It's just brilliant because, I mean, you can totally see that that's exactly what would happen, But I love it because after the girls leave, he asks Larry, like, how did you make that happen? How did you do that? And he's like, mistletoe. It's an old tradition.
And I love Balki's like, can we leave it up all year long?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, but he's like, well, I'm taking it with me.
Doesn't even say something like what a scam or what a
what a scam. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally Balki. But it's just everything about it is just so perfect. So then, okay, they're getting ready to go, and that's when, all this talk about the snow, he's like, well, let me just make sure everything's cool at the airport. So he calls, and the airport is completely snowed in. And so we finally get our first big, bum, bum, bum moment. And from there, that's when they start, going through all the hijinks about, about trying to find a bus, and no, of course the roads are closed. And so then they call a snowplow place. Which, I mean, come on, man.
And I love that he just thinks like there's going to be an extra snowplow somewhere that he could just rent one and drive it up home. And I do have to point out, so I live outside of Chicago, a couple hours south of Chicago. So I know the general vicinity of a lot of this stuff. And it's funny to me that he's going to fly home to Madison, Wisconsin, because I even did the research here. So a flight from Chicago to Madison is roughly an hour.
Oh, wow.
And it's 2 hours to drive. But when you factor in, you have to drive to the airport, which I'm sure just roughly where they live, it's probably going to take them a little bit to get to the airport. Then you got to wait around the airport and all that stuff. So it would have made more sense for Larry to drive in general back to Madison. It was just, I remember I'm watching this, I'm thinking, why would he fly to Madison? Like, that's not that far away. And so, yeah, I had to look it up just to make sure. So that was bugging me that his first thought was to just fly there, when driving there likely would have taken him roughly about the same amount of time, if not less, in the grand scheme of things.
You really got into it. That's cool. See, I don't know anything about that area. I've been to Chicago once. I guess twice, but it was just passing through. I had to get to Dixon in Illinois, where my wife's grandma passed away. And so I've only been through Chicago. I've never actually been in. So all this area wise is just like beyond me. So that's really cool, man.
Adding a little insight to everything that's going on in this episode, or the best to the best of my abilities.
I do love that, before they get into all these, hijinks here, they're kind of having a little heart to heart, and, Balki's kind of saying it's going to be weird without my family. And, I'm going to miss decorating the Christmas turtle. And, every time he says something like that, the face that Larry makes, where he just kind of pauses and
like he's sort of going along with it, and then he's like, wait, what did you say?
Yeah,
like sort of the light clicking on, like, what a Christmas turtle. Okay, then.
And they decorate him with what did he say, like baubles and tinfoil
and tinfoil, and he's like, but you wouldn't understand.
Yeah. You don't know anything about that. He's like, I'm really gonna miss Bernie.
Yeah.
He named him Bernie. But Larry gives him some great advice about, well, your life's changing now, so you just kind of got to go with the flow. But don't worry, we'll take care of you. You're here with family and all that kind of stuff. So that was earlier my mistake for leaving it out. But as they're trying to find a way, they decide, why don't we just take your car? Let's go ahead and drive. And of course, they can't, because not only are the roads closed, but the snow's pretty bad and the blizzard's coming in. And so they really can't get their car anywhere. And they realize they're stuck. Of course, we get another gag where Balki's pushing the car all by himself while Larry's inside trying to steer.
And I love when Balki's like, why am I out here pushing? He's like, because you're a terrible driver. He's like, you're the one who's on the sidewalk.
Yeah. He does say. Yeah, I love the back and forth between these two guys. I mean, you can tell that there's some sort of, affection and love there, but at the same time, they do get on each other's nerves. And so,
they argue like brothers.
Yeah.
They have that sort of just like, I love you, I respect you, but boy, you know how to push my buttons.
That's exactly
kind
right,
of thing. Yeah.
So they realize that's it. They're not going to be able to get back. And Balki at this point goes to, he's like, well, look, we're here. It's Christmas time. Let's try to make the best of it. And so he finds a Christmas tree lot, because that's kind of where they're stranded by. And so he's like, let's get a tree. And so he knocks on the trailer and he asks for a tree. And of course, the guy's having his Christmas Eve dinner with his wife. And he's like, I'm all out of trees. I don't have any trees. It's Christmas Eve. And so they see one in a dumpster because it's like barely a tree. It's like a Charlie Brown type tree, like there's hardly any leaves on it. It's pretty miserable, pretty pitiful. The guy's like, hey, you want it? Take it. It's cold. I'm hungry. Just take it. So of course, Larry is like devastated because he was hoping to be what he calls the Christmas boy.
Yeah.
I guess it's a family role.
I found that's a trope I've seen in a lot of, we get it in a lot of Christmas sitcoms and in movies and stuff about people being excited to be the person who hands out gifts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's something in your family, but for me, I'm always like, I don't want to do it. Like, I want to just sit here and have my stack of presents and you could come bring them to me. Like, I've never gotten into, because like they do that in A Christmas Story, where Ralphie's like, or the little brother's like, I want to be Santa, and they're like, oh, you were Santa last year. Ralphie gets to be Santa, and I was always like, I don't want to hand them out. Like, just put my gifts over here. Let's do this. Like,
see, I completely get that. My daughter, my 8-year-old, loves to hand them out. She wants to be the one to hand out all the presents. For us, Santa's gifts were always by our stockings, like separated into piles, and we knew which one was ours. But then all the other presents under the tree, like from our parents and stuff like that, my mom and my dad would pass them out. So it was just they would always pass them out. But my daughter is like, no, I want to pass them out. I want to. She's the same way. She wants to be the Christmas girl, I guess. I don't know.
She wants to be the giver, the present giver.
Yeah,
I mean, I
cool.
guess. Yeah, it is cool. More power to her. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it is better to give than to receive, but I like receiving.
Amen. Amen.
So yeah, he wanted to be the Christmas boy, and because there's 9 of them, it takes like a whole 9 years before it's his turn again. And so he was so excited because it was his turn, and he's gonna miss it. And so there's a whole big thing about don't let his sister Elaine be the Christmas boy. He wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. At this point, he's so devastated because not only is he not going to be with his parents and his family for like the first time ever, but he's also going to have to wait 9 more years before he can be the Christmas boy. So he's like, I'm going to go for a walk. And so, of course, Balki, being Balki, offers to go with him. And he's like, no, I want to be alone. So Balki takes the tree. And while Larry's walking, he does the whole apartment up. And he buys all sorts of things from the place where they work, which is actually below their apartment building. Mr. Twinkassetti's, and he takes, he has tinsel and ornaments and lights. And of course, and there's a bit where he lights the lights and he's trying to cheer Larry up. He's like, look, check it out, the tree. And, of course, Larry this whole time is like, no, it needs to be thrown away and, buried and put a sheet over it. And, all that kind of stuff. He's like, just wait till you see what the lights. Turns on the lights and it's beautiful for like 2 seconds. And then the lights fizzle out.
And I love the scene where Larry comes in and he notices that Balki had done a little decorating the trees up, but he's moping and he's frustrated. Yeah. He takes his jacket off and he goes to put it into the coat closet, and there's Balki in there with a Santa costume on, with a couch cushion shoved in his pants and up over his belly. And Belky's trying so
He's
hard.
trying very,
He's
very
trying
hard.
so hard. And I love too when he says, look, I found a place that had food, and he had the food covered on the table, and it's all Jewish food.
It's all Jewish food, yeah.
Yeah,
Gefilte fish
and he's like,
brisket.
yeah, we can still have a feast. It's just Belky being so genuine. Like, he wants to just do anything he can to help his friend.
Yeah.
And Larry's just not having it. He's frustrated.
He is. And, I mean, I get it. I remember the first time I had Christmas without my family, and it just wasn't the same. I mean, we made the best of it. We did what we could, but it was not the same at all. And so it was one of those things where, you try your best, and you hope that you can at least still have the Christmas feeling there. But yeah, I mean, I completely get where Larry's coming from, because there's something quite missing, when it's not that your family around you. At least, your first time alone, I should say. Mm-hmm. You kind of get used to it after a while, but your first time alone is just like, what's going on? It's not Christmas. Where is everybody? Where's the party?
Everything just feels so off and so different. Yeah. And I mean, like I talked about earlier, it was easier to connect with Larry in that moment of just like, I want things the way they've always been.
Yeah.
And when everything is different, not just this or that, or mom put white lights on the tree instead of colored lights this year or something, it's a big change when you go from everything to nothing. Yeah. So I get it. Like you said, it's easy to understand why Larry's frustrated, because it's hard to go through that for the very first time.
Yeah, you definitely feel for him. And Balki's trying. I mean, he's trying his best, to the point where he even grabs Larry's sweater and he's like, "Hey, come on, man." Essentially. And, it kind of shakes Larry out of it. But, he's like, "Hey, let's open presents. Hey, let's do this and let's do that." And so Larry's like, "All right, fine." Because Balki lets him be the Christmas boy. He's like, "You can be the Christmas boy." So he passes out, the presents, and, he even does he does the whole thing to Larry. Like, "Hey, look, I'm not with my family either. You give great advice, but like, you don't take it." I mean, he even has he says a great thing. He was like, "I'm trying my best here, and you're just giving me nothing but Baugh hamburger."
Yeah. And he tells him he's an Ebenezer Stooge.
Ebenezer Stooge, yeah. Oh man, it's so great. And so he convinces Larry. He's like, "Yeah, okay, you're right. I'll try." And so he lets him be the Christmas boy, hands out the presents, and Larry gives him a little boombox, which he calls a home entertainment center.
Yeah.
Which I love. It's like, oh wow, how far things have come.
Yes.
But then he gives Larry his present, and it was a handmade, like a knit throw, or blanket, essentially. And he said ever since the first night that Larry took him in, like for an hour after Larry goes to bed, he literally would just knit this quilt, blanket thing for him. And Larry is like so moved, and he recalls, and this is the part that got me, where he recalls when he was 6 years old, and even though his dad like would always buy the presents for him to give to his mom, it was the first year that he realized like he wanted to give something, himself. And so he made, some really ugly present for her, and she loved it. And she was so proud, and he was so proud. And so he kind of relates at that moment. He remembers that feeling, and it kind of brings Christmas back for him, which is like such a beautiful thing. And of course, the lights turn on, when he says, "I think I'm having that Christmas feeling." And then all of a sudden, the incandescent lights around that tree just turn on.
And it's just like this instant change where, like, I think in a lot of different scenarios you would question it, but it makes sense why it just like you see it click in Larry in that moment. And what I love about this scene, and it's something I bring up in a lot of the episodes that I cover, is we get the heartfelt music, and that's when you're getting something. Like Full House was the king of that. Full House would play that heartfelt music, and you knew that's when you're going to get your lesson. That's when you're going to get your resolution. It was all coming in that moment. So when that music started, I was like, "Oh yeah, here we go." Like Belky's gonna, I know how this is going, and I love it. And to steal a bit from the 'Tis the Podcast
folks, that's that Linus moment for.
Oh, it's cool. I steal
Larry.
from him all the time.
Yeah. And it clicks. It clicks, and it's like he understands it. And it's just, it's so cool. That scene is just really awesome. I love like all the feels in that moment. It's
1,000,000%. Yeah. Well, and he even says, happy birthday. And of course, Larry's all confused. And he's like, well, that's what we say, on Mipos, because, Christmas is not like about the presents and all that stuff. It's about, the birth of Jesus, and Larry's like, yeah, I guess I forgot about that part. And he's like, oh, well, we sheep herders didn't forget, he's like, we were the first ones to know.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a funny,
very
line
good.
there. Great line. And of course, that kind of segs into the carol at the end, which is the first Noel, which they talk about, given to the angels, or the angels given to the shepherds and all that. So it like just ties in really, really beautifully. And it's just, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a perfect way to start, the season. I think I'm probably going to watch this episode every Christmas now. It's something about it, it's just, it, like you said, it got me. It had a Linus moment. It hit me in the Christmas feels, and it was just so authentic. And I think that's Balki's authenticity is what really sells it.
Without a doubt, I'm with you. This goes like into my rotation. It's just, and also at the end too, when they're the carolers are outside and they open the window and Balki says Merry Christmas, and Larry looks at him and he looks back outside and he kind of waves a little bit and says Happy Birthday. And it was just like, man, it's just it's such good writing.
So good. Yeah.
It hits you with the feels. And especially like right now, we're out of the holiday season, obviously. And it's like, I'm getting to the point now where like usually around this time of year, I start to shift away from that, and I'm excited and ready for spring and summer. But I know like once middle of summer comes around is usually when I'm like, okay, I'm going to pop in an episode maybe here or there just to sort of to help me get through a little bit.
Yeah.
This is definitely going to be a part of it. Like watching this today made me very happy because it was just like, it just gave me that little bit of boost, that little bit of like feels that's just like, I can't wait to have the Christmas tree lit up and watching this like type of feelings. Cause it's that good. It works so perfect in that 22 minutes or whatever that you get everything you need in a very short, brief period of time. And it's borderline perfect for me. It's very good.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. The next episode though is also really good. But it doesn't really, or at least for me, it didn't really hit home until that very end, that like the very, very end, whereas throughout this first one, I kind of felt the whole buildup of it because, I could relate to Larry. I'd been there when I was away from my family, it's just that kind of thing. This next episode is from season 4. It's called The Gift of the Meepiat. In this instance, now they're at their new job. So Larry's a reporter. Balki works in the mailroom, and his boss, Mr. Gorpley, is kind of like the resident Scrooge, essentially. So it's not Twinkassetti anymore. Of course, it starts off, they're in the office, they're singing songs and opening presents, and Balki gets this beautiful handcrafted mug, or I don't even know what you would call it. It's I've heard someone say a Davros cup or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, they don't really they don't really tell you exactly what it is, but it is very cool looking.
It is, yeah. I mean, especially knowing that it was handcrafted, hand carved. It's like, wow, that's cool. So he gets this this hand carved, amazing thing, and you can hear, Mr. Gorpley's all, of course, the whole time is like, yeah, whatever. He's like I said, he's the Grinch, and everybody else. We have Harriet from Family Matters. This is where she got her start. She had 2 seasons on Perfect Strangers before she spun off onto her own show. And this is, she's there. The lady that plays Twinkassetti's wife in season 1 and season 2 ended up playing a completely different character later on.
That's what was funny. She pops up, and I was like, wait a second. I'm like, I need to look this up. So I'm looking it up. I'm like, why does she have a different name? Because I had rewatched the first 2 seasons last year, but I never went beyond that. So I was very confused. I'm like, why is she here? Why does she work at the newspaper? Like, what is going on? And then when I looked her up, I'm like, that's not even the same person.
Nope, it's
like
a completely different character. Yeah.
just to go back on what we talked about earlier, like they don't care. They're just gonna they like the actress, so we're just gonna work it out.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
Why not, right? So they're all like, wow, that's amazing. And of course, Mr. Gorpley, he does his whole bah humbug bit and tells everybody to get back to work. And we get another, the one thing about Balki is that he's so funny because he's so intuitive, like emotionally, and yet at the same time, he doesn't pick up on a lot of Americanisms, even though by this time it's been 4 seasons. So you'd think he would, at least by now. So when Gorpley makes a sarcastic comment about getting all choked up, Balki tries to give him the Heimlich maneuver. Although, what did he say? Like the ham hock maneuver?
Yeah, the ham. He's like, I gave you the ham hock maneuver.
And of course, Gorpley was like, yeah, it's gone. It's out. You got it. But that's when Larry comes in. He's like all beat up and disheveled. He had just been shopping on Christmas Eve. Of course, that's another trope where it's like wild and crazy. It's like the Wild West out there in Christmas Eve. And so he bought Jennifer a $125 sweater, which Balki at first thinks is for himself. He's like, I don't know if you can pull that off. Oh man. And so they kind of go back and forth. And again, what I think is really done brilliantly in this episode is that while they're talking about their party and things like that, before they even mention the party, you can see they kind of cut back to Gorpley, who's like picking up that cup and just admiring it, and so it's like just a little subtle kind of preview of what's to come. So, it's just good foreshadowing there. So yeah, there's all the jokes and Gorpley overhears them talking about parties. Apparently, they're throwing a big Christmas party for everybody they work with and a couple of friends. Of course, Jennifer and Marianne as well. And they didn't invite him because he is such a jerk. Which, who wants a jerk at their party? I get it.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I thought was funny too is the difference between how in the first season it's all about Larry just needing to be back home, and now it's like he doesn't even mention anything about Christmas with his family. It's all about this party and everybody coming over, and no Mr. Gorpley and no mention of his family anymore. It's so funny how strong.
Is he gonna be the Christmas boy? Who knows?
I guess in Larry's defense, if he hosts the party, he could be Christmas boy every year.
Every year, yeah. That's true. Yep. But I love how he like downplays it all. He's like, oh, no, it's just a couple of friends getting over, coming over, and that's just real small. That's all. It's small. And of course, Gorpley's like, yeah, whatever. And he says some insult and walks away. And Balki wants to like invite him because he feels bad. He's like, you didn't invite him? And you're like, no, I don't want him in my party. He's a terrible human being, kind of a thing. And later on that evening, because Mr. Gorpley essentially makes Balki clean up. It's just the two, and Balki overhears Gorpley trying to like come over. And at first you think it's like, I don't know, girlfriend or mistress or something like that. And I think he even talks about his ex-wife. Why would she want me over? She divorced me 2 years ago or something like that. And then we find out that he's actually talking to his mom, and his mom doesn't want him to come over.
It was such a good setup on that. I love that little build up because you're questioning like, okay, maybe it's a girlfriend or a wife, and then no, why would I go to my wife's house? We divorced 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
And you're like, who is he talking to? He's like, all right, fine, I'll talk to you later, Mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, that's a good setup. I like that.
It was good, yeah. But Balki overhears, and so he's like, hey, do you have any place to go for Christmas? And because he wants to invite him, but he has like trouble getting the words out. So he's finally like, do you have any place to go? And he's like, yeah, of course I have a place to go. And he says something like, I'm going to be going up more chimneys than Santa or something like that. I don't, that's some ridiculous line. And so of course Balki is like, oh, good. Because for a moment there, I thought you didn't have any place to go, and I was going to invite you over to our party, but since you have some place to go, and Gorpley immediately is like, yeah, I'll come. Okay, I'm good. So again, you see the seeds that he's kind of lonely, and they sow it like that. He's kind of desperate, but he's such a jerk that no one really wants him around. And so we get back to the apartment. Larry has like a huge checklist. He's like checking his hors d'oeuvres. He's checking the temperature of the fire, all sorts of things like that. And so Balki has to like break the news to him that he invited Mr. Gorpley to their party. And so he kind of does it in a very, very roundabout way, saying, I invited someone less fortunate than us. Because in Balki's mind, he has no place to go. He has no friends, so he's less fortunate. So he's technically not lying.
True. And I love how Larry's like,
it's a very Obi-Wan Kenobi thing.
Yes. And I love how Larry's like kind of okay with the idea. He's like, okay, I get it.
That's good. Yeah.
Balki's trying to do something nice for somebody.
Yeah.
And then, when it comes around to being Mr. Gorpley, and I always loved Mark Lynn Baker has such a good, like, upset, like crazy face.
Yes, he does.
Like his eyes kind of bug out.
Yeah.
And he's so funny in those types of things. It's very funny to me, his reactions. And I just loved his reaction to finding out that Balki invited Mr. Gorpley. It's just, he just goes like insane, and it's very, very funny.
So much so that he grabs a wreath off the door and
to try to like pin down Belky's arms.
Puts it right over him, and he's just kind of trapped under the wreath because he doesn't want him to open the door for the guests.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the first guests are his friends Harriet and Lydia, and I think I forgot his name, the other guy, the security guy.
I can't remember his name either.
But it's it's them, and they kind of break the news to them as well. They're like, all right, no, we're out of here. He's like, no, we just won't answer the door. And of course, more people come to the door. And this whole time, every single time Balki's about to, Larry puts the wreath back on him to kind of trap him. And he does a voice. He does some sort of impression. So one time, I think it's like, I know one time was a Hispanic voice.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other was like, was it Irish or German? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was some like sort of like thicker. Yeah, like overseas voice. I don't know. What's the best way to put it?
European, I suppose.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
So he's the whole time he keeps doing that, and of course they let in Jennifer and Marianne and a few other people that are just background extras, and finally it is Mr. Gorpley, and he's like, "We'll just ignore him. We don't. Just everybody keep quiet." And of course Gorpley's like, "Appleton, I know you live here. I know you're in there. Like this has happened before," kind of a thing.
Yeah, I love that one of them, I don't remember who it was, maybe it was Lydia, who had said something to the effect of, "We tried that before," and he knocked on the door for 7 hours.
Yeah.
For like a birthday party or something.
Oh man. So finally they let him in. I love this part because they start exchanging presents then. And sorry, it's cracking me up because he starts essentially he just berates everybody and belittles all their presents. So Lydia gives a present to Harriet, and it's a scarf, and Harriet's like, "Oh, nice scarf," and he's like, "Oh yeah, they were handing them out at the gas station," kind of a thing. It's ridiculous comments. And then Harriet gives Lydia a gift, a new book, and he like spoils the ending for her. And the whole time, every time Balki, because he's again dressed as he's doing the whole Santa thing. Every time that he's going to reach down and get another present, you can see them, Lydia and Harriet trying to like strangle him and strangle Gorpley in the background.
There was that part where like Harriet tries like jumping over to him to like attack him essentially, and Belky's like, "This isn't an episode of Geraldo."
Yeah, he does say that. It's so funny because the jokes like that, and Seinfeld is really, really bad about it as well. Like jokes like that, they're so perfect for the time. Like, it's like, "Oh, that's funny. I know what's going on." And then now they just date the show.
Yeah, I'm sure of anybody born in the mid 90s probably wouldn't get that reference of who Geraldo was.
Yeah, who's Geraldo? Yeah, they don't know anything about Al Capone's vault. Oh man, so they give Jennifer presents. One's from Marianne, another one is from from Larry. Turns out they got her the exact same sweater, but the gag there is that when Jennifer opened Marianne's first, it was that sweater, and she's like, "It was really expensive. I spent like $29 on it." Gorpley's just laughing. He's like, "Oh, I hear they go as high as 125."
Like him getting like tickled pink over the idea of pink. Nice pun with the color of the sweater, but
yeah.
He like, you see him like building up, like he knows Gorpley's the only one who knows how funny in his mind this is going to be. Yeah. And he's like giddy at the idea of Jennifer opening up that gift from Larry because he knows what it is.
Yeah.
He knows everything about it. So it's just like his excitement is very funny.
Like, you overspent, bro.
Yeah. By a lot.
Yeah. Almost $100. Oh my gosh. So, he makes a comment, says something like good move, Appleton, or something like that. And so Larry's like, that's it. And he like gets him, and everybody like gangs up to like throw him out. And so they're walking out the door, and all of a sudden you see Balki like run through the door, and he like pulls him back in. He's got him like over his shoulder, like a fireman carry. And of course, this is where we get like the monologue that kind of changes your mind about Gorpley a little bit. And the whole point is that Balki invited him because he said, there's like a tiny little ember of goodness and of love and of Christmas and stuff like that in him. And if we do it right, essentially we can like fan this into a flame. That's like his whole point of view, why he invited Gorpley over. And so this is where we see that Gorpley is formed by his life and all the situations that have happened to him. He really goes all out. Essentially, like, his wife divorced him at Christmas like 3 years prior. His dad, or his real dad, I guess he finally met his real dad, and he like stole all the money that he had saved for college. Then when he was 8, like, their trailer burned down and they had to spend Christmas at like the Red Cross. But then it gets worse because after he says it, he said, actually, no, that was a good Christmas because I got to sleep in a real bed. And you're just like your heart just starts going out for this guy.
You go from like, hate's a strong word, but from strongly disliking,
intense dislike,
yes, for this guy. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, like I'm like, look at this jerk. Like, I was getting upset with this guy. I'm like, what a jerk. Like, I know there's going to be a resolution, but come on. And I wasn't expecting it to be a resolution like that. And all of a sudden it just makes you like, wow, like I feel really bad for this guy. Like, I get it. I understand why he's so hateful towards Christmas because of everything that's so terrible, and people have been awful to him his whole life. And it's just a defense mechanism and all that stuff. So it was definitely not the way I saw this ending.
Me neither. It totally got me by surprise. And I didn't remember this one at all.
No, me either.
The first one I had vague recollections of. I remembered, Balki in the Santa costume taking the pillow out. I had just very vague memories about that. This one completely, I didn't remember at all. So when I watched it, I mean, it like really hit me. And so Balki sits Gorpley down. Everyone's just kind of like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's been through so much. It's crazy. And Balki gives Gorpley a present. And so he opens it up, and it's the cup that his mom had carved for him, or had given to him. And it's, that beautiful cup from before. And he's like, you're giving this to me? I've never gotten a gift this personal before. And so again, we get that whole personal gift idea. It's not just buying, anything. It's like something that really means something. And so it's like everything about this episode like just draws you in. And this is like the culmination of it, because he like is finally like, well, I didn't get you anything. And he's like, yeah, you did. And what does he say?
Well, essentially, because Mr. Gorpley's like, well, I didn't get you anything. And Balki's like, but you did. You gave me the ability to give you a gift.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And that for Balki, giving something meant so much more, because he knows how awesome it felt to get that gift in particular from his mother. And so to be able to give that to somebody else meant just the world to him. And and again, it just goes back to earlier that Balki's just such this pure, lovable, likable guy who just trying his best to make everybody happy, and he's succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very heartwarming. Like, it's just such a sweet moment. And back-to-back episodes, Balki gets the award for
he's the winner. Yeah.
Yes,
he wins Christmas.
He is sugary sweet. He is a plate of sugar cookies. I mean, that's this guy. He's just a perfect Christmas character all around.
Yeah, I mean, he not only did he change Mr. Gorpley, but essentially he changed everybody else too. You know, he made them all realize that, hey, you know, we're judging and we should be embracing. It's Christmas time. You know, he should feel the same love we do. And in fact, I think he even says something like, "Do you feel like this every Christmas?"
Yeah.
And of course, Larry has except for Balki, he feels like this every day. You know, kind of line, which is true. And so then they all start singing a carol, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and you know, it's another one of those beautiful, beautiful moments where they're just kind of gazing out the window, and you know, cut to black. So yeah, it was great. I love this episode as well. I think this one hits a little harder to me. You know, it really, this one got me. I might have gotten a little misty, but but I think both of these and the show in general, I just, you gotta love it because it has so much heart.
It's so underrated. It's fun, it's silly, but it does have that heart. And as we talked about earlier, I think especially for adults, it's easier to get into without little kid problems. You know, it comes to a certain point where with myself watching old Full House episodes where, it hits, it helps because of the nostalgia, and I watched it when I was growing up and all that, but I don't relate to DJ doing bad on a test.
Yeah.
Something like that, where something like this, it's a little easier to find a way to connect with it. And that's what I think so good about both these episodes. I didn't remember the second episode basically at all. The first one I had watched last year, and there were other parts prior to that I'd remembered. This second one took me completely by surprise. It just was totally unexpected, especially for how it started. I just thought it was going to be just this silly sort of, we're not going to let Mr. Gorpley figure this out. Ha ha.
How are they going to resolve it?
And it ended up being like a real sweet, touching moment. And that very much surprised me.
Same here. Yeah. It completely got me by surprise. It was one of those where it's like out of left field almost for me. Like I didn't expect that at all. But it landed. I think it landed very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the strengths that Perfect Strangers had, was that they knew how to land an episode, especially when they really wanted to. And these Christmas ones definitely, they definitely prove that. So what would you say? Because I got to know, what would you say would be your happiest memory or moment of these episodes here, or Perfect Strangers in general?
You know, before I talked about the whole thing with my sister and all that, that's definitely my overall favorite memory with the show in general. But for myself, for the first episode, for the A Christmas Story episode earlier in 2020 or late in 2020, I guess it was right after Thanksgiving, right before Christmas. And I just wasn't feeling it yet. I don't know if it was just not knowing what Christmas was going to be like in 2020. And I was just feeling just like a little, not quite in the same spirit that I was normally in. But there was one night I was just flipping through trying to find something to watch. And I was going to do that episode on my podcast, but then I had realized I would have been doubling up, like doing a second episode, and I wanted to get other stuff in before I doubled up on other shows. So, but one night I was like, you know what? I've got the tree on. It's all dark in the house. Just the Christmas tree is lit and those lights are on. And I flipped that first episode on, and it just like clicked, and it worked, and it hit me at the perfect time. And I was just like in this awesome mood. And it just got me to that point of where I was really excited again, even though I wasn't sure what the holidays were going to be like. And it hit perfectly. And it's going to be a part of my Christmas canon. It's going to be something I watch all the time, because it's just that first episode hit so well. And then after seeing what the second episode was all about, I'm all about adding that too, because it works. It works so well to get you those feels that I think sometimes you need.
Oh yeah, for sure. for me, I think it was I think it would be seeing that second Christmas episode with my wife. So I saw the first one and it was fun and I laughed and it got me. And my wife already didn't like the show. She saw that pilot and was like, no, that's it. But I managed to convince her to sit down and watch at least the second, because I'd seen the first one. I said, let's, I need to watch the second one, watch it with me. So I convinced her to watch it. And we both, even she started feeling, like, wow, something's going on here. And so we were both I'm not crying, but we were both just, a little teary eyed. And so afterwards, just kind of sitting there, lying on the couch with my arm around my wife, just watching the Christmas episode. I mean, it got me in all the right, Christmas places. And so that would be my favorite moment, I think. My happiest moment.
That's awesome. That is a very good memory. It's cool.
It's definitely one that I'll remember for quite a while, especially because the episode was so great.
Yeah.
But now we come to my favorite part of the show, which is a little segment I like to call Gag Me with the Spoon. So this is where we do our best impression of our least favorite part of the show. And eventually we'll put it up to the voters to vote, or to listeners, to vote, and they will decide which one of us did it better. I think you're pretty safe because I went a whole season without winning. So
keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah. So you never know. But as a guest, I'll let you go first. Just kind of set up the scene, and we'll go from there.
So as we've mentioned, it was hard for me to find a part in either of these episodes I didn't like, and I was going to try a Balki quote, but it's hard. I can't do that. I tried. I literally was standing here trying to say things out loud, and it sounded so terrible, which probably would be better for you in that regard to hear that. But this other scene jumped out to me, and it's at the very beginning. It's in the first episode, and it's when they're at the retail store there, and Mr. Twinkasetti he's upset that his wife has spent $100 on meat products for everybody at this party. And he's complaining about all this, and they're getting ready to leave. And Mr. Twinkasetti sees his kids standing by the door, and he yells at them and he goes, Donnie and Marie, put that stuff down and get in the car. And then little Donnie turns and says, oh yeah, try and make us.
Nice. It's funny you picked that though, because I also picked Twinkasetti.
Awesome. The great Ernie Sabella. I love him.
Yes. I loved him most as the owner in Saved by the Bell.
Yes, Mr. Carosi.
Yes.
Yeah. And his daughter was Leah Remini.
Leah Remini, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I loved it.
Yeah. I had a big crush on her back in the day.
I think we all did.
Yeah. So I also picked that moment, and it was when he was complaining. And so I'm going to try my best here, but there's no way I can do Pumbaa. So I'll do my best though. I don't even like these people, and you spend $100 feeding them meat. It's terrible.
I just loved how upset he was about meat. That the fact that it was so specific that it was $100 on meat, not just anything else. It was just very funny to me.
Well, I love that the whole time he's saying that he's got a black eye, and later on, Balki asks about it because his wife comes and gives him their bonuses, and she's like, he wasn't really mugged on the way, delivering your bonuses, and he's like, well, then who gave him the black eye? She just looks at him and she's like, don't worry about it. Oh man, those were good. And so I'll go ahead and put it up to the voters, and you guys just tell me what you think, and tell me how soon I need to send Matt his stickers. But seriously, G.I. Joe, they taught us that knowing is half the battle. What do you think the other half is?
Well, I'd say if knowing is half the battle, then the other half of the battle is to always decorate your Christmas turtle and to always have Christmas lettuce to make sure he doesn't wander out of the living room.
Yeah, nice. Oh man, that's better than mine. Mine was if knowing's half the battle, the other half is booking a flight earlier than Christmas Eve.
Smart. See, and people should know from all these sitcoms that's when the big snowstorms always come
in,
yes,
guys.
They're always on Christmas Eve.
Yep. I don't know why people don't, more people don't realize that.
It's a known fact in the sitcom world.
Definitely. Matt, it's been a blast talking with you. What do you want to plug?
Sure. I've got the newish podcast still. I started back in October, the TGI Podcast. The idea is looking at classic TGIF episodes and TV shows, but also sort of branching out. We've done some Home Improvement, which isn't TGIF, but I think they're also very fun to do. So it's kind of like 80s, 90s sitcoms. We try to go monthly specific. So October will be Halloween, and Thanksgiving in November, Christmas in December. We've sort of jumped around. I've done some Valentine's Day episodes, St. Patrick's Day episodes. I'm going to sort of ramp it down a little bit in the coming months, but we're going to jump back up Christmas in July. Can't wait for that. We're going to do some like back to school stuff in August, and then really jump in heavy with the Halloween stuff in September and October. Going to do like little bonus Christmas episodes on the 25th of each of those months too, to lead into Christmas. So super excited. We're going to get guests on. I want to have you on. We're going to do, I don't know, we could do Perfect Strangers again. I know Chris from Christmas Time in the City. He loves this show too.
It's a great show.
We could have him on there as well and do some fun stuff. But I'm really excited about what's coming ahead. It's fun to do these. I mean, it's a labor of love doing some of the stuff. It's just fun and a nice creative outlet. And you can find us where, of course, you could download the episodes pretty much anywhere where podcasts are available. On Facebook at TGI Podcast, and also on Instagram at TGI Podcast. You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Matt Eurich. So all those things are there. So come check us out. I think you'll enjoy some of the episodes.
Definitely. Yeah. You need to check them out. It really takes you back to those days when you're sitting at home on a Friday night with your family and everything is just perfect. You have no cares in the world except what's on TV and how much you're going to laugh. So definitely check it out because it's amazing. So, Matt, thanks for coming on. We're great episodes, and I'm glad that I got to share them with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. These were exactly what I needed today to watch these. So fun, very good overall in both episodes. And I love your podcast, so I'm very grateful to be on.
Oh, well, thank you. Back at you. And anytime you want, I'll hop on. Apparently, I'm on everything, so might
as well. We still got to check you off my list. We'll have to get you on for Christmas in July. That'll be the goal.
Ooh, that'll be fun for sure. Yeah, definitely put me down. I'll be on there.
I will.
Right on. But on that note, I'm going to end it by saying, just because this Christmas is different doesn't mean it can't be good. So check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're feeling the joy of decorating the Christmas turtle, leave us a review on iTunes. Not only does it help us reach more people, but you also get a free sticker. Now, don't forget to vote. Later, dudes.
Do you long for those casual Friday nights spent in on the couch, cuddled up with a blanket, maybe some delivery pizza without a care in the world? Then I have the podcast for you. Hey, I am Matt, and I am the host of TGI Podcast. As a product of the 1990s, I want to go back and take a look at all of the classic TGIF shows, as well as many other classic sitcoms from that era, to determine if they truly are a holiday classic. We've got you covered with Halloween and Thanksgiving in the fall before we go full steam ahead with Christmas in December. Come give us a listen if you want to take a trip down 90s Nostalgia Lane.